I try to start it right on the hour, but sometimes it's a little before, sometimes it's a little after. And
No
I
worries.
I think we're live.
We're
Let me double
live.
check the Zoom stream. Okay, it says that we're live, so we'll
Yeah.
get started. So welcome everyone. I'm Kyle Paskowitz. I am the chairman of Parentalink and the founder of Family Court Reform USA, and this is our biweekly series that I tonight we have a guest that I'm very excited to have on tonight. This is Jenna Noble. She's fairly well known, I think, within our cause now, and made a name for herself with her organization called Pathways Family Coaching and Reunification. And Jenna is extremely knowledgeable when it comes to the area of parental alienation and some of the other child custody issues, and works directly with families to provide coaching and other services. So I'm super excited to have you on, Jenna, and
Thank you.
that's my introduction. So if you would like to maybe tell our audience a little bit about yourself, I will give the floor to you for a little bit.
Sure. You did a pretty good job already. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good on my end.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm just, a mom and a stepmom that went through alienation as a stepmother. My husband was alienated from his kids, and it was long and it was exhausting and it was an very expensive experience. And, it was very destructive to my life. And I really didn't have anybody out there that I had. There was nobody out there, sorry, that was really able to help me or to help my husband. And that was really frustrating. So, with some strategy and some out of the box thinking, I guess, my husband and I were able to get a protective separation, so we could reunite with his girls. And now I take my, 19 years of hindsight, everything I've learned and studied, and those strategies that I've used before that worked in our family, and I apply those with my clients. So I help them navigate court. I help them learn skills and, have a understanding of their child's perspective and what they're going through. I've talked to hundreds of alienated children, now adults, that have gone through this, and what would have helped them, what were they feeling and dealing with at the time, long-term effects and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of try to focus on the kid, as we all should. That's it in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Well, I know that we've been talking for quite a while, and I knew a little bit about your backstory, but it's always good to have that refresher and kind of
Hmm.
understand what motivates people and brings people into the movement. I was a child of divorce. I didn't go through any severe alienation myself, but I have a little bit of a perspective of what it feels like to have, the
Hmm.
two parents in conflict. And then when I went through my own divorce, I really tried to put myself in the shoes of my kids to understand, well, what would it feel like to be them? And I think that that's an important part of the process. Now, a couple more questions I have for you about kind of your background. I think,
Hmm.
don't you have a degree in, is it psychology?
No, I don't have a degree in psychology, actually. It was kind of a fork in the road. I was taking psychology. The plan was to get my
Okay.
degree in psychology because I thought really the only way that I could help families and solve this was to become a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. So in the middle of my studies, this opportunity presented itself to, work as a coach, and I made the right decision. I'm so happy that I chose to leave that, but I still study psychology to this day. I will always be a learner, and education is free, you guys. So if anybody tells you any different, that is, totally bogus. You can learn as much as you want about any aspect, right? You can learn about the law, you can learn about psychology, you can learn everything you need to know to help prep you.
Absolutely. Well, and I totally agree with you. I understand that you've studied under Dr. Craig Childress, and he's got some really great insight on this. And I think that there's quite a few people out there. I mean, everything that I read that you post is very, very insightful, informative, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you on tonight. And I would also like to officially announce, and I haven't done this yet. I was very tempted to message you earlier today and tell you the good news, but we did have our annual elections last night, and you were both nominated and elected for a board position with Parentalink. So congratulations
Wonderful. Thank you so
and
much.
welcome on board. We're all very excited to have you, to have your level of expertise in the work that you do. We've had this conversation for quite a while about bringing you on, just because of the value of what you bring to the movement and to families. And I think that we need to share that as much as possible to, let people know that there are a lot of different strategies to deal with alienation and deal with child custody issues. And you have helped to develop a strategy that's very effective.
Yeah, and thank you. I'm so very excited, and I'm excited to help you guys expand and to put our heads together. I'm very much, as you know, in the mindset of we need to be collaborative. It takes more than one brain. It takes as many as possible to make a difference. So, just thank you to everybody. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, we're super excited to have you on board. So, maybe if you could tell me a little bit more about your practice. I know you probably can't get into specific details about, individual cases, but maybe if you could kind of give us some examples. What is it that you do? What your organization does? Some of the techniques that you use. I'm sure that folks out there would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so we have a very wide array of, program services, things that we do for families, depending on where you are in the situation. I work with parents anywhere from still married and having conflict within the home. Sometimes there's even severe alienation happening in the home within the marriage, which is something that not a lot of people are talking about. It's usually centered around divorce. I deal with sometimes even we're divorcing and things are good, we're still friends. So and then everything up to severe alienation cases where we've got teenagers that are completely rejecting of a parent and even making really nasty, horrible, false allegations. So it really depends. I usually talk to anyone that's interested in working with me or working with us first to kind of understand what's going on in their situation, then I can better lead them down which path will work for them. So we have, an array of programs. We're still developing things. So online programs, perfect. It's COVID. Everybody's stuck at home. So you can do some online education. Again, anywhere from, co-parenting, learning some conflict resolution skills. We're coming out with a course right away, actually, that we're really excited about, that is for children. Right. I notice there's not a lot out there for kids. And I was also a child of divorce. Wasn't a nasty divorce. I was quite young, but I still do have memories that have impacted me because of that. And my kids are at an age now where a lot of their friends' parents are separated or they're going through divorce. And I see these kids really struggling because there's really no tools or anything out there to help them. And sometimes, the parent's not in a place to do that for them. So the course is really for parents to purchase for their children if they're going through a separation or divorce, to teach their kid, how to make it through that and how not to get sucked into alienation and how to, remain in a relationship with both of their parents and not, like I said, get dragged into the conflict. So that's a really important one we've got coming up. Other programs and stuff, we've got a great timeline service where we focus on behaviors and look for, good and bad patterns that are happening in the family so that the courts can really understand what's happening. We're expanding that as well. I'm excited. We're going to be joining somebody soon that's going to help lead us down a road of, figuring out precise, data points that we can look for in people's data that would lead to, possible filicide. That's a really scary topic that people don't really want to talk about, but I think it's really important because it's absolutely astounding, the numbers. The families, the children that are being unfortunately murdered by their parents when they're going through something like this and there's severe mental illness going on. So I would like to be able to see before that happens and use this as a tool to help parents to identify that this could be coming so that courts can recognize that and do something and step in before it's too late. So we have lots of plans. We do coaching and consultation. So work one-on-one with parents, sometimes kids even, sometimes alienators, sometimes the alienated. It really depends on if they're able to or willing to make some changes. And we consult specifically on helping them strategize. Sometimes it's strategizing with a mental health professional that's involved, helping the parent to kind of, for lack of a better term, corner that mental health professional and get them to do the right thing if they're not really recognizing or able to identify what's going on in the family. Sometimes it is helping strategize how to get this family into a therapeutic model instead of the normal adversarial court situation where they're ripping a family apart. So guiding that person, guiding the lawyer in a way to resolve that and keep this family united. Right at the end of the day, the kid needs both its parents, even if one is got some bad behaviors and some negative coping mechanisms. We just need to teach the family how to cope, and well, we need to teach that kid how to cope and how to be in relationship with them both. So yeah, sorry, I'm rambling. We have so much to offer. I don't even know where to begin when people ask me that question.
No, that's great. I think you've given, you always give really good responses and a good overview. And as you're talking, I just always come up with more and more questions. So, I mean, feel free to ramble, because I feel like you bring so much to the table. I want you to get as much of a chance to speak as possible, and not, because I always talk so much, that's why I want to bring people like yourself in that can, actually speak from a professional context and share all that you've learned.
Thank you.
So I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about, and we've talked about this a couple of times before, and I'm sure you're very well versed at responding to this particular question. So what do you say to the parents that say parental alienation has been debunked? It's a bogus theory. It's something that just simply doesn't happen. It's not child abuse. And how do you respond to something like that?
Excuse me. I respond, I agree. And I agree because the term needs to kind of go away. So okay. I refer to parental alienation as kind of a pop culture term that those of us that have gone through it know what it is, right? It's really a word or a term that's used to describe a dynamic that's happening within our family. But that's not a diagnosis, right? I can say I have chest pain. The diagnosis is heart attack, right? So that's kind of how I separate it out. I like to use medical terminology because people kind of understand that better, right? So we're talking about a lot of, different issues that fall under parental alienation, but it's the term itself that is causing so much conflict, because it's true. We cannot create a diagnosis of parental alienation. It's never going to happen. Right, I agree with a lot of the Gardnerian stuff. I think a lot of them are brilliant and they paved the way for us. But I'm resistant to that term because it's already been rejected by the APA. Right, they've already said we need you to define this differently in order for it to be an acceptable diagnosis, and that hasn't happened yet. Right, so that's where Dr. Childress came in and kind of said, well, the APA has asked us to do something and you guys really didn't listen, so here's what's happening, and it's child psychological abuse. So I agree with that completely. Right, the diagnosis should be child psychological abuse. But again, I don't totally agree with everything that Dr. Childress has said either, right? Everyone brings, this is why collaboration is so important. Everyone has great minds. We all have different skill sets. We all have, great talents, and to solve this, we really need to put our heads together. So I don't know if I answered you. I agree.
Okay. No, that's a good response, and I think a lot of us have different understandings of everything. I haven't studied Childress nearly as extensively as you have, but I do agree with a lot of things he says, and like anybody else, there's some things I'm a little bit more skeptical of. I know one thing that really raises eyebrows is when you talk about protective separation. So you brought that up earlier, and some people would feel that that's very extreme. I'm curious, under what conditions would you say, that what diagnosis needs to be made? What type of symptoms do the child or or indicators do have to be present in a particular case for something like that to be justified?
Good question. So I can't say that I'm the one that can really say when that should be justified, because it really needs to be a well qualified mental health professional, which I am not. Right. So it really needs to be someone that is trained in family systems therapy and attachment, in personality disorders, in trauma. They need to have this big wheelhouse. And they're the ones that really need to define when that's appropriate. Um, in my opinion, when a child is so severely affected psychologically that they are experiencing such severe, negative coping mechanisms, when they are cutting, when they are drinking, when they are using drugs, when they are, being sexually promiscuous, when they are on medications for mental illnesses that they do or do not have, right, for anxiety and for depression, and when they're really rejecting a parent with such viciousness, then I think it's really appropriate. But the alienating parent also comes into play in that picture too, because can that parent recognize with help that they need to change their behaviors and that they're affecting the child? So really two things come into play. If the parent does not have that ability and will continue relentlessly to sabotage and obstruct that relationship, and the child is experiencing really extreme emotional difficulties, then I think it's necessary. And please understand that I am not like I am not all for protective separations. To me, that is an absolute end of the line. This is our last shot to help this kid, because I have professionally been in reunification workshops and facilitated. I've done, I've collaborated, excuse me, with mental health therapists on reunification. And I have personally experienced what it is like to have alienated children be placed into your home by a judge, taken away from their alienator, and thrown into the mix of your family. And it is not easy, and those kids go through a lot. It is very, very hard on them. So yeah, I'm not a cheerleader for it. I know that there is a necessity sometimes, but I'm not one of those people that's preaching this is what we need to do.
Yeah, and there's, I think that there's quite a few gray areas when we speak about, these behaviors and whether, we have an alienator or alienate or behaviors that are leading to the child rejecting a good parent and things. There's all sorts of gray areas. I think that there's subtle things that, that one parent might do. It can just be a, kind of a disapproving attitude towards the other parent, to much more extreme where they're actually coaching the child to to think or even accuse the other parent of things. And you've got all these different extremes, and as with anything, I'm sure it's a case by case basis on how you address each of those situations. I'm wondering if you could give maybe some practical advice if somebody finds themselves somewhere in the middle there. They're maybe, and typically it's a non-custodial parent that's the one that's feeling rejected by their child and struggling to have that relationship with them. Where can they start if they feel like they're having these challenges with their child? What are some of the things that you would recommend for them to do in order to start rebuilding that relationship and getting in a better position to be an equal parent to their child?
That's a layered question.
Probably a big one.
That is a big one. First and foremost, and this is going to be a hard pill for many to swallow, is that you need to do some work. You need to get some therapy. You need to figure out why you ended up in this situation in the first place. So that dangerous word that we don't like when we're being victimized by someone else, accountability. Why are we here? What attracted me to this person in the first place? Right? Because it's not by accident. There's something to be said about transgenerational trauma, and when you can figure that out, It really is transformational in your life, and it helps you to transform the possibilities for your children, even if they're being alienated. So first and foremost, you need to figure that out. You need to get therapy. Um, you need to do some work. It might not come from your life. It might come from, you're repeating a pattern of your mom or your dad or whatever. So that might sound a bit hippy trippy, but it really is true.
No, I'm going to agree with you, not to interrupt your
Yeah,
response,
no,
but I
go ahead.
remember the first time you ever said that to me, and I
Mhm.
really thought about it, and I asked myself that question. I asked myself, well, why did I wind up in the relationship that I did with the person that I did, and looked at other relationships in my life, and I realized you were absolutely right. A lot of it boils down to doing some personal work, asking
Mhm.
ourselves the hard questions, asking ourselves, how are we going to break these patterns that we found ourselves in, whether they're just personal patterns or intergenerational, some of the traumas that we've suffered, a lot of it is very much inner work that we need to do. So I appreciate you being willing to call that out. And sometimes, giving people the hard love that they need
Mhm.
to get them straight. I'm one who most definitely appreciates that. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Well, I'm glad that you took it and did some, self-scan, because it is hard to digest, right? Most people get very reactive and say, "Well, how dare you blame me? I'm a victim." And it's not about
Right.
that, right? It's not about blame, and it's not about fault. It's about, accountability. Accountability is a good thing. I tell everybody that. Accountability empowers you, right? When you are outward focused all the time on someone else, then you're out of control. You have no control of your life when you can be inward focused and focus on, what is it about me? What is it about my past? What is it about my childhood that brought me here or whatever? And you can start having those little light bulb moments, and that pattern starts to click. You're not going to repeat that again, right? It
Yeah.
really is transformational. I feel like I was a new human when I put that all together.
Yeah,
So
well, it all starts with us, and
yeah.
it's a lot of it is our reaction and the way that we think about certain things. I mean, we have a lot of control over what happens in our life, and I've learned to even exercise that in my own situations by looking at what is it that I can do better. How can I have more control over myself than anything else in this world. So why not start there first and maximize our response and our knowledge and our education and everything that we're doing. Let's make ourselves better first, and it really can be very transformational.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So that's my number one, right? Is do that work and figure out the whys so that you can
Hmm.
fix that. Um, and then learn skills, right? Nobody, even in a perfect situation, perfect, even in a healthy situation where you're in a healthy relationship and you've got beautiful children at home, and you're parenting together and everything's going smooth, we still screw it up. There is no manual on how to parent kids, and we bring
Sure.
garbage from our parents no matter what, right? That stuff just continues to get transmitted even if we do better than the last generation. So it is even 100 times, if not 1,000 times harder to parent an alienated kid and deal with the chaos that's going on around that. So you need skills, and you need to teach your kids skills, consciously teach them skills, right? So um, managing yourself, right? Just managing your emotions so you're not going off the wall. How to deal with conflict, how to manage communication and a relationship with someone who is really high conflict and is trying to constantly upset you, right? You need to model that to your child, and you need to teach that to your child so that, because at the end of the day, they're the one that needs to manage that relationship with their mom or dad, right? They need to go to that house and they need to live in that setting, and they need to know how to cope and how to deal with it and how not to take it on as their own. Again, how not to get dragged into the middle of the chaos and be able to set some boundaries, right? We need to teach our kids what boundaries look like.
For sure. And that's one of the things that I often find myself counseling other parents to do is,
Mhm.
when they're in these high conflict situations, to separate themselves emotionally from it,
Mhm.
respond in a mature, calm way. Don't feed into the drama, and learn to have
Mhm.
a relationship that's more proactive and not reactive. And
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right, is also to try to teach these skills to the kids. One thing that you brought up earlier, was about educating people. I know that here in the state of Washington, we have a parenting class that people
Hmm.
that are going through a divorce have to go through. I think it's a 4 hour class, and they do teach a lot of good things in those 4 hours. But we
Hmm.
don't have this built into our culture where there's we don't teach coping mechanisms. We don't
Hmm.
teach relational skills, and I don't know you know I don't know what the best approach is to getting that education out, but I think that we also have a cultural issue where,
Hmm.
number one, we don't have an expectation when two parents separate that they're going to be equally involved. We have this kind of custodial, non-custodial model. That
Hmm.
seems to be the expectation. And in some places, so I've heard, the expectations are different, and they also have a lot less problems
Hmm.
within their society and within their court system when they're dealing with custody issues. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I interrupted your flow, but if
No, no,
you
no,
care
it's
to
okay.
comment on some of that as well, I'd love to hear your perspectives on those things.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that we have a societal issue. I mean, parental alienation is a societal issue. Period. Right? It's a problem. Um, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But you just had touched on different cultures and stuff like that, right? And I'm not going to go into the different cultures I've talked to, but many of them are like, this really doesn't happen in our culture because they have a very close knit family. It's different than North America, right? You get married, you move away, you see your in-laws maybe twice a year, right? It's not the same. Where there's some cultures where the family really scoops up the newly married couple, and the whole family lives together and they take care of each other, and grandparents are just as involved as the parents are, and when there's a separation or something, the family almost comes in and takes care of it and resolves it to protect the kid,
Yeah.
right? So
Well,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say it's interesting because you can actually see that statistically, and it feels like my camera is doing weird stuff now,
It's
but
okay.
um, you can see that statistically if you look at divorce rates here in the United States anyway, where I've studied it more than other countries. But
Hmm.
you look at divorce rates and you look at Asian and Hispanic families tend to
Hmm.
have much lower divorce rates than some of the other families in the United States, and I think a lot of it does have to do with
Hmm.
a cultural thing. It has to do with the environment that we're raised in and some of the cultural influences. And I'm wondering how can we I mean, America is a big melting pot for all these different
Hmm.
cultures, and I would like to see us do better. And we don't necessarily have one unified culture all the time, but if we're kind of going down a road with the majority of American culture is going down a bad path when it comes to
Hmm.
divorce and separation. How do we impact that? What can we do to to teach people how to handle these situations better? I mean, I don't know if we can eliminate divorce. I mean, our divorce rate has been 50% or close to it for quite some time.
Hmm.
The number of kids that are born outside of marriages has been going up quite a bit since about the 60s or so. We're up to about 40% of kids are born outside of marriage. So, growing up in split families or in single parent homes, is it's a common thing, and it's
Hmm.
not, it's certainly not going to change overnight. How can we better educate people? And I would say starting with children, but also educating parents. What are some good ways that we can do that?
I would love, love, love. I don't know how to make this happen, but I would love to see in schools kids being taught skills of resiliency, skills of, you disappeared on me. There you are. Skills of resiliency, how to set smart goals, you know, being trauma informed. If we could start teaching kids about what trauma is and how to deal with that, and if we started to build a culture of, therapy is like going for a haircut without that stigma surrounding it. If we could just start to reshape kids and they had that understanding of, like, I just keep saying trauma. If the world had more understanding of trauma, the roots and the long-term effects, I think that things would change a lot. And from a court level, we need to help to shift things, like I said, from the adversarial environment that it is now, and let's split the family and who's better, who's the bad parent, who's the good parent, to getting judges training or finding some sort of funnel. I think we talked about this before, to put them through so they don't even have to get to that court, right? We just have a judge overseeing things from afar. I think there would be a lot of changes, right? Get them in a therapeutic model, and how do we keep this family together and heal them?
Absolutely. I think those are two good solutions and things that we hope to work on more in the future. I do know of an organization called Time to Put Kids First. I don't know if you've heard of them, but I know that that's one of their goals is to get educational programs into some of the elementary schools.
Yeah.
And I know Deborah and her son James, who founded the organization. They actually used to be out of Washington here, and they were people that were working in this area when I first got involved with this particular cause. And so I know that that's something that they want to do is get into the elementary schools, teach coping mechanisms, teach kids how to deal with these things better. And I think that's a fantastic idea. But I love the idea of a holistic approach when it comes to the court situation. It shouldn't, I think that we should avoid the use of litigation. We should avoid the conflict to begin with by having more mediation, more coaching, more therapy, and also what you said about a culture of just being more accepting of therapy. And I think that that's changed in our culture somewhat. I know that in my parents' generation, I think going to therapy was always this thing that was thought of as, first of all, you don't tell anybody that you've gone to a therapist
you're
because
crazy then.
you'd have to be crazy. You'd have to be mentally ill, that only people that are, having very severe issues would go to a therapist. And I found that over time, I think our culture has changed with that, because we've acknowledged that it is very therapeutic to talk about things, to have these group support sessions and things like that. And I think a lot of people are becoming much more accepting of that. That's how we often process some of the things that we've been through. You meet somebody that understand, whether it's a professional or another parent or somebody else that's kind of been through some of the same things that you have, having the ability to talk through it, to talk about it, to bounce ideas off somebody. It's such an important thing. And to have, child custody issues and struggles that you're having with parenting your child, to have them be all taboo and something that you just simply don't talk about, means that we're not addressing the problem. So I think that is changing in our culture, and I think that that's a good message, to get out to people, is that, hey, if you need help, there are people, both professionals and organizations that want to help, that want to, that are willing to listen to your story and are willing to help guide you. I mean, obviously, people need to be willing to do the work themselves as well. But the more that we get out there, the more that we talk about it, the more that people realize that it's not just them. They're not so isolated anymore, and they feel that support. And that's one of my major goals with Parentalink, is that, I want to be able to provide more support for families out there. So that's kind of one of the ideas behind us doing these live streams. It's one of the ideas of, having folks like yourself come into our organization and help guide us, and also be able to help provide some of that support to some of the communities that we serve. So yeah, I'm wondering, you've kind of been in this movement for quite a while. Can you comment on, maybe some of the good things that you've seen come out of this, some of the positive directions that we're moving, maybe some of the things that we need to get away from? What are your thoughts on kind of the overall social cause that's been building over the last few years?
Another tough question. You're beating me
I'm
up
good
tonight.
at those.
That's
I just
okay.
want to give you lots to talk about,
Yeah, I know. It's okay. I mean, I've met a lot of wonderful people that are doing amazing things, right? Like Wendy Perry pops into my head. She's doing fantastic work and she's educating schools, right? What does parental
Hmm.
alienation look like? What can you do? We need more of that. So that's awesome. That's something that's always been on my mind, something that I'd like to do. When I saw her doing it, I was like, dang, like good for you, right? So we have parents out there that are making things happen. They're walking the walk, right? They're taking their pain and their trauma and they're turning it into something incredibly powerful and positive. So that makes me completely overjoyed to see, because not only are people rising above their traumatic experience of being an alienated parent, they're actually using it, to help other families and to change the world. So sorry, just my little message to anybody, that if you are a parent that's suffering, don't ever think that you have no control or you have no power in this situation, because your power is immense. You can like transform what alienation is and what it looks like and who understands it. Like a group of people coming together can do a lot of good. Um, the I was very heavy into Facebook in the first little while there. I don't mean to take a negative turn. I love the support groups, and I enjoy going in there and commenting and trying to help families and stuff like that. But I've actually tried to take a step back from that, because support groups really do have a place, right? It's a great place to feel not so isolated and to find some common ground with people, and to finally realize that I'm not alone. I'm not going crazy. This is happening to a lot of people. But I find it also turns into a lot of co-commiserating. Um, so I find that some of those groups are very hard to get any sort of positive forward movement. So I've taken a step back, and it was a really good decision. It's a big, broad world, and there's more to life than Facebook, everybody. Right? So if you're looking for answers, they're not necessarily on Facebook. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's so much going on. I don't even know what to comment on, right? There's so many good people doing different things, and again talking about why it's so important to be collaborative and recognize that we all have, unique gifts and brains and talents and perspectives, because we've got, members that are a driving force in politics, right? Politics and me, no, thank you. That is not my area. That is not my passion. But I see some of these other people that are really pushing and making changes, and it's astounding. That's their passion, and that's their wheelhouse. Um, we've got Ginger Gentile, right? She just made this documentary. Have you seen it?
I actually have not seen it. I was supposed to watch a preview of it, and there's kind of a long story behind that. But I
Yeah,
missed
it's
the
okay.
original preview that I was supposed to watch. But I hear it's amazing, and I did see her first one.
You did. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you can buy it now. I don't mean to pitch her stuff, but I mean it's 10
That's
bucks.
okay.
It's cheap. It's cheaper. I mean, you can't go to a movie now because of COVID anyway, so you may as well watch one in, but it's so wonderful to know that there's now a documentary out there that, probably at some point I imagine is going to be demanded enough that it's going to hit like Netflix, and the whole world's going to get a look into what's actually happening in these families. Right? I was in a preview of it, and there was a judge sitting beside me, I remember, and he got so uncomfortable, because I don't think that these lawyers and judges actually understand or realize, once these people leave their courtroom, what really goes on, right? What happens to these kids? So, yeah, sorry, I got off topic there, but just thinking about this, the whole movement, having Ginger a part of it in this documentary, Racing Families, come out, I think is going to be instrumental in really waking a lot of people up.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree, and I think that there's a number of movies and documentaries that have come out that have been very influential. I refer people back to the Divorce Corp movie quite a
Yes.
bit. The Red Pill was another one that was really
Yeah,
really
that was a good one.
popular, and recently A Marriage Story, that was a
Hmm.
really really moving story. Yahya McClain put out a movie. What was that one? Oh, I'm trying to remember the name, and I feel
Okay.
bad now. I know it was called
I'm gonna
War.
Google. I'm gonna Google it. I'm not familiar with that one, I don't think.
That one I know when we had done some national events, we actually did a preview of that movie, and that one was really good and moving. And I feel horrible that I'm forgetting the name of it now, but
Oh,
it's
it's
been a
okay.
while. So, um,
Uh,
but yeah, there've been a lot of really
I know.
influential documentaries that came out. You know, and that's one of the things that I always try to direct people to those. You know, if they're just kind of getting started, you know, sometimes just being able to watch something in a 2 hour format to sit
Hmm.
down, you know, that's been done, you know, professionally, you know, with a production crew and you know, been presented in a good order and has a, you know, a good broad viewpoint. You know, it's a really good way for people to kind of you know, just get spun up on the issues. And I think it's also very impactful to know that somebody put so much time and
Hmm.
effort and money and investment into producing something like that. That's not just one person's story. That's
Exactly.
thousands, that's millions of people that those things represent. And that's one of the reasons why I am such a big believer in social media. And I do not disagree with you at all that
Hmm.
that we often kind of rat hole into different subjects. You know, people may get in the habit of just, you know, kind of coming online and posting what they're feeling and not necessarily addressing the issues.
Hmm.
But I believe that there is a lot of power in just exposing what's
Hmm.
going on and the ability to organize people and the ability to share information and things like that. And I know, I mean, even my own journey has evolved quite a bit over the years, just knowing how many other people are out there doing work on a professional level that are
Hmm.
getting educated, that are building organizations, or that are getting into elected positions, or doing lobbying, or whatever it is that they happen to be doing. You know, yourself getting into counseling and coaching. All of these different things kind of play in to help, you know, improve the lives of many people. And so for me, you know, it's been really great to watch it evolve over time. But I did want to comment a little bit more about, you know, the social media also is I feel that, you know, people getting into these groups, sometimes they, at first, they just need a place to vent, or they need to
Hmm.
know that they're not alone. And maybe there isn't a whole lot of education that's going on, you know, through a lot of groups. And it's just kind of a, you know, a place for people that, you know, that want to complain and they want to post nasty things
Hmm.
online or whatever. And I try to always avoid that. That's one thing I've been very careful with, you know, our organization and our pages and our groups and things is
Hmm.
not to, you know, just let a lot of this, you know, this negativity fester, but try to guide people in the direction of solutions. And I feel like, you know, we're getting more and more, you know, we're building that ability to be able to do that.
Hmm.
And it's a way that we reach out to people, because when they first, you know, are in that crisis mode, they don't know where to go. They don't know
Hmm.
where to find help. You know, I had no idea, you know, where to go even to find a good lawyer. I wouldn't know what some of the, you know, alternatives would be for finding mediation or finding counseling or anything like that. And sometimes we learn through our network. I mean, I learned a lot just from talking to other people. But I
Hmm.
think that a lot of times when somebody's going through a divorce or a crisis, they tend to, you know, start to withdraw from a lot of their friends and
Yes.
family, maybe if they don't understand. And so having some place to go for resources, if they find a particular group that they tend to gel well with, or that they, you know, that they're seeing some positive messaging from, you know, that could give them hope, that could give them more resources and some other directions to go. So that's one of the things that I hope to continue to do with our group, is kind of be a positive influence, you know, not just on the movement in general, you know, but also on new folks that are coming in and they really need help. I want to be able to point them in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's a lot of awesome groups out there too that are not necessarily, quote unquote support groups, are more leading people towards solutions. And that's um
Mm-hmm.
those are the good ones, right? Those are the ones where you're going to find things that are going to help you pull out of that hole. Because when you're dealing with alienation, or not even alienation, you just go through a separation or any time hard time in your life, we tend to, well, if we're being isolated by someone, that's one thing, but we tend to isolate ourselves, right? We kind of hole up in our bedroom or, do whatever, don't leave our homes. And like you said, Facebook gives you that ability, or social media of any kind gives you that ability to reach out and find people that are going through similar things without having to leave your safe little bubble. So yeah, I mean, the world's powerful now. Social media is powerful, right? When it's used properly, right?
For sure.
It's really endless what we can do with it. Um, Look at the changes that have happened the past 10 years. When I realized what my husband and I were going through, because I, spent years not knowing what was happening, there was nothing out there. There was no groups, right? There was no support groups. There was nobody talking about it. There was no Facebook at the time. There was no Instagram, right? There was no LinkedIn. Now parents can just Google. People Google me. I'm like, how did you find me? And they're like, oh, I Googled, I think my husband's a narcissist, or, you know, why are all my friends turning on me? Right? Just simple things they're Googling. They're finding us, right? We
Yeah.
never had that opportunity 10 years ago. I don't even know if that would have happened 5 years ago. So, I mean, things are changing. I call it like a snowball, right? Give it another 10 years, guys. This snowball is gonna crush this.
Oh, I think it's going to be
Hmm.
completely different in 10 years. I mean, I
Hmm.
think, when I first came into this, people were saying, oh, well, it's never going to change. It's always been like this. And I met people that were doing some of the work that we're doing now, 20 years ago. There was a guy, I was
Hmm.
actually at the Capitol in Olympia when this guy that I didn't even know calls me up, and, he had heard about me through the organization or some of the work I
Hmm.
was doing. And he said, look, I really appreciate everything that you're doing. I want to encourage you. I also have some stuff I'd like to send you. And he sent me a copy of a bill that they had proposed 20 years prior that was trying to do almost the same thing that the bill that we had in play at the time
Wow.
was trying to do. And that, on the one hand tells me, how long people have been struggling to change some of this stuff, at least from a legislative
Hmm.
perspective. But it also has told me, I've always felt like social media is going to be the game changer. And that's the one
Yeah.
thing that keeps giving me hope, is because I can see, in the 5 years or so, 5, 6 years that I've been doing this,
Hmm.
how are very aware of these issues now. Even in political circles within my state, I hear people talking about parental rights all the time. When I first
Hmm.
got into this, those were words that were never uttered by legislators, and then I started hearing them use that in speeches and things. And so, this has really changed quite a bit, and I think those of us that have been around for a few years are starting to see those
Hmm.
changes accelerate. But since we're on the topic of legislation, there was I'd like to get your input and your thoughts a little bit, and you touched a little bit on it earlier, but we talk quite a bit about dealing directly with the parents and impacting the families, and I know that that's really kind of your wheelhouse. But
Hmm.
I'm curious how much you think this can be impacted and is impacted by the system itself and by the legislation. Is changing laws going to help?
Yeah, of course it will. Um, but I think it's gonna take what we're doing now, building that snowball to make that happen. I don't think it's gonna be, let's get the laws changed and everything else will follow. I think we need to do everything first and then the laws will change because they'll really have no choice. I mean, again, that's not my wheelhouse, but of course, our society is guided by laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could not exist without them. And we have a really broken system, and it's a money making machine, right? So, yeah, of course, it will change things hugely. I mean, it would be a game changer if we could get some laws in place that protected kids' rights to their parents and parents' rights to their children. I mean, no, I had no clue even when I had kids that the government owns my kids. Nobody told me.
Yeah.
Basically, right? So yeah, they own us. They own our families. They have the say over our children. Um, Somebody told me once that you think there's two parents in a family, but there's actually three. There's you, there's the other parent, and then, there's the government. And it's totally true.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because, the reason why I pose the question is because we get a lot of people that say, hey, they didn't follow the laws to begin with. You changing a bunch of laws, it's not going to do any good. And I agree with you. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have invested years of my life trying to change laws if I didn't think it was going to do any good. I think that
Yeah.
the laws aren't stagnant. They
Mhm.
evolve every single year. New laws come out, new laws are changed, and they get better. And I
Mhm.
think that's the stepping stone. I think it changes very, very slowly. I think it takes
Mhm.
forever to change a law, and I think the system is very, very resistant to it. And I think that you kind of touched upon the fact that it's a very the family court system is a very profitable business. There's a
Mhm.
lot of money involved, and the way that money is spent influences politics. It
Mhm.
influences the way that the court system works. It influences the behavior of people and the things that they do. And we're probably never going to change that, but we can certainly create some laws that better protect people from being victimized and from
Mhm.
the court system being used as a weapon against people. And just acknowledging that these are problems, and having the people that work within those systems acknowledge that they're problems. You said earlier that you've met a lot of judges and lawyers that
Mhm.
you don't think they even realize the impact that they have on families. And I would agree with you. I think that they get very, very wrapped up in the law and what
Mhm.
they do because they're trained to litigate. They're trained
Mhm.
when you go into a court, one person wins and the other person
Mhm.
loses. And that's not how a family needs to decide how their children are going to be raised. When you have two parents, to have one come out the winner and the other come out a loser, that's not a good dynamic for that family.
Yeah, exactly. And if we're focused on the best interest of the child, how is that in the best interest of the child? Right? If one parent loses and one parent wins, that means the kid loses.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I totally agree. Well, that's one of the reasons why equal shared parenting has been kind of our flagship bill.
Mhm.
Let's create this expectation that when two parents go into court, they have, or when they go into a child custody situation, that they have equal rights and responsibilities to that child. Let's make that the basis, and work out from there. If there's reasons to deviate from that, or if the two parents decide that, hey, maybe it'd be better if the kids spent more time with you, I'll go to,
Mhm.
I work, I'm really, really busy. If that's the situation with a family, then I think that they can determine that that's in the child's best interest.
Mhm.
But when you have a parent that's fighting for equal time, and you've got another parent and a court system and other people within the system saying, well, no, we need to delegate you to this non-custodial role, you're going to take a back seat, in the family, and to this other parent for whatever reason that they feel is best. I think that
Mhm.
you're depriving, that child of that right to that other parent. You're depriving them of the right to have an equal relationship with an entire side of their family. And when somebody, a third party, comes in and decides that, I think that can be very traumatic to the child, and a really bad message to send to the child.
I agree. And you're creating like a power imbalance too, right? And just for the child's perception that, you know, this is my home with the one parent and that's where I go spend my weekends, right? That's not my
Yep.
home, that's my mom or my dad's house. It creates this imbalance and a perception in the child that the other parent is not as available or isn't as good or well equipped to take care of them. It sends a clear message. Both parents could be, you know, great parents and both parents could be getting along fantastic, but that perception has already been laid by creating that order. The kid already has a view of what that means, which is
Absolutely.
unfortunate, right? It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I think so too. And when I put myself in the position of that child, and especially when there's a lot of conflict, and they
Mhm.
start to feel that the court is favoring one parent over the other, what kind of message is that for the child? They're gonna see, hey, society in general, because they don't know the difference between a guardian ad litem and a judge and a lawyer and a social worker. They don't know all that. They just know
Yeah.
that one of their parent has a lot more power in that dynamic than the other parent, and the rest of society has kind of supported that and enabled that. So that
Mhm.
starts to belittle, that parent in their eyes. And
Mhm.
especially if there's a dynamic between the two parents where that's the message that they want the child to have, it just reinforces it.
Yeah, exactly. Because kids don't know better. I mean, think back to when you went through your separation at first. Did you even know that right off the hop that the courts really didn't want what was best for your family? I mean, I was pretty bliss. I had rose-tinted glasses and kind of looked at the government and courts and all that as they were protecting us and doing the best thing for us, and they always made the right calls because they saw the big picture, and that's what the kids think, right? So, I mean, I don't know how many kids I've talked to that were like, well, you know, my mom or my dad only has me 2 days a week, and that's what the courts gave them. So, I mean, why would they do that if they were a good parent, right?
Right,
Good
right.
question. Why would they do that if he or she is a good parent? Because they don't understand how things are set up.
Yeah. Well, no, when I went into it, I always had the feeling that the court system was kind of shady, and there was a lot of shenanigans that went on. There was always kind of the tongue in cheek joke, well, don't
Yeah.
don't ever get divorced. If you get divorced, you're going to lose your shirt. And I had people, warn me of that.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, it had never really fully sunk in. I
Hmm.
always thought, well, you know, I can afford a decent lawyer. I mean, I'm not rich, but I can at least afford an attorney. I haven't done anything wrong as a parent. I'm a good parent. I didn't feel like my ex would do the things that she wound up doing.
Hmm.
I had this idea that everything was going to be okay,
Hmm.
and it went south very quickly. I mean, it went south almost overnight, and that's what really, kind of slapped me in the face. Is I didn't think that I could lose,
Hmm.
control of the situation, lose my family, lose everything so easily.
Yes.
And when I went to look for help, when I went, well, I need to find an attorney. We didn't even have attorneys at first. And when, the
Hmm.
situation started going south, I realized, okay, well, I'm going to need an attorney. And then I walk into attorneys' offices, and, I mean, some of the attorneys that I met were almost salivating at my case
Of
because
course.
they saw that it was going to be very high conflict. I
Hmm.
even had some of them offer to make my ex suffer as much as they possibly could. This is what, they wanted to do. And
Hmm.
I didn't want that. I mean, I said, no, that's not what I want. I want what's best for my family. I don't want to get taken advantage of by the system. And there were just so many people out there that just didn't go about this the right way. And I mean, I wish that there were consequences for people that practice law that way. I don't think that that's right. I think that they're contributing
I
to
agree.
destroying families. And there's, where's the oversight? Where are the consequences when, when that some of the players involved don't have the best intentions?
Hmm.
They are just very narrowly focused on winning, and getting paid
Doing the
lots and
most
lots of money.
destruction. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Jenna, as always, it has been an amazing conversation with you. I appreciate everything that you do. I'm very, very excited to have you be on our board of Parentalink and Family Court Reform USA now. I'm excited to have all of your input and everything that you bring to the table. Do you have any other final comments you'd like to make before we wrap up our hour?
I don't think so. Just thank you so much for having me. It was nice to talk to you. And I look forward to seeing what we can do and what kind of changes we can make. And yeah, if anybody out there, I just want to say, like I said before, if you're just a parent or, you were an alienated kid that's grown up now, that understands the perspective of the kids that are going through this, again, don't ever think that you can't make a difference. It's quite astounding how much one person can change. So please, anyone that's has any sort of passion in this, get involved. Things are going to change big time in the next 5, 10 years. We're going to see a complete switch. I truly believe that.
Absolutely. I believe it as well. I appreciate all your positivity and
Thank
everything that
you.
you do, Jenna. Thank you once again for being on with us tonight, and I look forward so much to working with you in the future.
Me too. Thanks, Kyle.
All right. Have a good rest of your
Okay.
night.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.